Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the August Redevelopment Commission meeting. I will let Vice President Hughes kick us off here.
First item on the agenda, approval of minutes from August 13th. So everybody had a chance to review those? Any questions or comments? Entertain a motion to approve. All those in favor? John, you want to take over?
Oh,
Appreciate that.
Mr. Grody. Snuck in there, didn't you?
Next item, claims approval. Looks like we have 9 claims totaling $484,406.58. Everybody had a chance to review those?
Just a comment, the PACE dollars are all being drawn down at once. We've had a great record year this year, so they've asked us to draw those down all at once. That's the largest of the claims.
Any questions or comments? Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Next up, bond request number 28, Madison Plaza, bond insurance, $3,125.
Yeah, this is a insurance policy that we had to take out until the work was finally complete, and we had a bond release from the state of Indiana. We have not received that yet, and the bond policy had to be renewed until such time we get that release. It's tied up in NDOT paperwork and bureaucracy, so unfortunately it's going to cost us a little bit more money here for a few months.
Any other questions or comments? Entertain a motion to approve.
Motion. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Financial report, Reedy Financial.
Yeah, Cole's here today. Let Cole present.
Yeah, it's good to see you all again. A couple updates for you this month. If you turn to your monthly cash balance page on page 5, and you'll look at September's balance being into the negative this month, this is truly just a product of fund accounting, as the TIF revenues are only received obviously twice a year, and it is not uncommon across the state for TIF funds to go negative throughout the year just in between receiving revenues. And especially since next month in October you have the property sale of 950 that'll be coming in as well. So this will be taken care of next month. Just to update you guys on that. Other thing, as Tony mentioned, was the PACE had its first and final draw for the year, so PACE funding will be done for this year. And ending balance for this year is still looking at 1.2, and taking a look at the other fund balances this month as well, you'll see the Super ATV fund had a small claim go and get allocated to that one as well. You guys can check out the other fund balances, and if you have any questions, let me know. Besides that, a little kind of reporting requirement updates. We'll reach out here soon about doing the TIF impact, and we'll be, of course, coming down to present the TIF impact to you guys. And also, besides that, there'll be the spending plan. We've been talking spending plan as well with Tony and with legal. We're going to be meeting on that and give you guys an update on that as well. And we'll be completing those two throughout the rest of the year.
Do we just take impact too?
Just by the end of the year. I'll just be reaching out here soon with Tony to decide when we want to do that. Do you guys have any questions?
I think so.
Cole, did you
Thank
explain what the what spending plan is and why that's required?
He has not, but that's fine. I was going to do that under 2025 and 2026 project discussion, if that's okay.
Thank you.
At this point, we'll move into old business, I guess. I have Gary Smith's here today. We had a couple questions about, as we contemplate this bond issue, to review and look at the impact of another bond issue would have on our cash and our cash reserves moving forward. I'll have Gary present that. I think he'll be able to put up on a screen. You have that in front of you as well. I think in some notes and some conversations, the real benchmark year is 2019 to look at. as being a year of what we would call normal revenue,
Beginning year.
the beginning of the year. And then because 2020 through 2022 had a number of anomalies, the Super ATV site, and some of the other property sales through that. But if you'll see here that, we will continue to have a great opportunity here to, even once the North Madison TIF district does expire, we were seeing about $1.2 million in TIF revenue in 2019 and the years prior, right, it had gone up. And once the TIF expires in 2035, we'll still be collecting about $1.2 million with some of the strategies that you all have approved and implemented over the last couple of years with some of these additional allocation areas. So,
I might just add real quick to Tony's comment there, which is, we ended up taking a longer horizon view of this, because when I came into office, as it shows in 2019, because a substantial amount of the Redevelopment Commission's cash was used to retire long-term debt, that really hamstrung us. And then we had to go out and execute strategies and get very creative with leveraging up the Redevelopment Commission dollars for maximum input. And then, as you know, we did the Super ATV deal, we've done the Sunrise Crossing deal, we've done a lot of development across the city. We need to optimize the North Madison allocation area, which is why we're proposing to issue this bond, so we can, do a few very significant and expensive economic development initiatives across the city. But we didn't want to impair the Redevelopment Commission's future ability to capture opportunities. And that's why we asked Gary and Cole to look at a longer horizon that takes us all the way through that 10-year period, so we could demonstrate that we're still going to have good cash reserves and liquidity to work with other opportunities to leverage up elsewhere, while we are doing things that are three primary goals, which is, infrastructure, housing, and placemaking. But that's what we're demonstrating here today, is that even though we are optimizing the benefit of these cash flows over the next decade, there's still going to be, because of the investments we're making, pretty good cash flow every single year in order to support future redevelopment activities.
Yeah,
So
Gary?
that's a segue.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you. That's a good introduction. I think, as Mayor and Tony alluded to, the last thing we want to do is approach any long-term decision with eyes closed, right? And when it comes to bonding on a revenue stream, there's only two things you consider. One is debt service coverage. We meet that. We have the ability to issue debts and lever these North Madison allocation funds up to 2035. And the second question, which is always perhaps the most important, and probably not often enough studied, is the implications on cash flow. And Madison's a bit unique in that there are several allocation areas outstanding. There's a lot of moving pieces to this. So, discussions with Tony and Mayor have been instrumental in putting this projection together. Every line on this document has been very well thought out and checked and reviewed and ran by Tony and Mayor. The revenue projections up top is where it all starts. It's easy enough to just look at North Madison allocation area as a beginning and ending cash balance, along with the revenues and the expenses that are known. But as we start pulling in other allocation areas, as Mayor had mentioned, this is kind of the fruits of our labor, over the last few years. The revenues coming in across these other allocation areas must be considered, particularly when it comes to maxing out our bonding capacity of North Madison. What other flexibility do we have? So the goal of this document was to put together a very easy-to-read, holistic view of the Redevelopment Commission finances, not only today, but out through 2040. So that's what's in front of you, 2038. That's what's in front of you today. This does include the 2024 Redevelopment District bond, which is in that little pink box right there. So we've got a half a payment coming in 2025, full payments coming out every year thereafter. And what does that look like with cash flow? So again, you'll see at the very top, those are all the revenues. Each line of this is what I would consider to be conservative growth. So we've taken what we know and we've extrapolated that out over several years. Obviously, the further we get out from this year, the more off these are going to be. But as we sit here today, we've only assumed 3% growth across these allocation funds over time.
which in our experience is pretty modest growth. And as far as all the other allocation areas that aren't categorized as North Madison, those are all based on known developments, based on investment figures, based on what I would consider a conservative discount factor. So if there was $1 million investment, for instance, in one of these particular allocation areas, we're not assuming all that revenue for $1 million is going to come in. We're assuming 60% of that assessment's going to come in and actually be realizable, which I would consider conservative. And then again, have that composite 3% growth factor thereon throughout. So the timing in which some of these projects are coming on, again, those have been discussed with Tony. This is when the project's going to break ground. We think this is the construction timeline. Based on that, we could expect revenues sometime in this pay year. So that's the methodology here as far as how the revenues were built out over time. So page 1, this is 2019 through 2028. Again, all the revenues there up top, and then down below, we've simplified what otherwise is a pretty complicated and lengthy, Fund 4445 for the North Madison allocation area into two very simple and easy to understand lines, which are how much of these revenues are being spent towards bond funds and how much of it's being spent towards non-bond related projects. So right now, the only things that are known are activity within the North Madison allocation area and our debt service payments in the Super ATV allocation area. So those two are built out there. So working from top to bottom, you got beginning cash, revenues, and then expenses, and then down at the very bottom, you have the available cash spend down and total expenses. So if we go to 2024, we've got our total ending cash projection, which ties to your monthly financial plan that we prepare, the 1.369. Going forward to 2025, we show it jumping North Madison from 2.7 million up to 6.3. That is because we're showing bond proceeds, 4.6 million. In reality, those revenues will come out, those expenses will come out, and they'll be funded separately. But just in terms of looking at cash flow, considering it all as one bucket. Up there at top, you'll see the revenues for all the other allocation areas there in yellow. And then again, you'll see in 2025, you'll see the 840 for bond-related expenses in North Madison goes up to that 1.15 million. That's including the half payment of the redevelopment district bonds issued in 2024. And then as we work down to the bottom, you'll see the Super ATV and you'll see your ending cash. So what we've done, once we start getting out past 2025 and really when we get into the full swing of the amortization of the redevelopment district bonds, is we have this available cash spend down number. And the purpose of this number is essentially to say how much room, when considering all allocation areas, does the commission, does future administrations have for funding economic development projects? And based on our projections as we've outlined them, 2026, that number is just over $1 million. That assumes that we spend all cash down to $750,000 per year. So again, keeping that same consistent goal we've had since we came in, which is the $750,000 minimum cash balance. How much could you spend down and still have that $750,000 cash balance? So you'll see that number change year over year. And once you get into page 2, and the revenue projections tend to start, ramping up a little bit, and the debt service payments remain relatively fixed, there's opportunities to fund projects with. Now, we don't have anything highlighted in the non-bond related category right now, but that's all to say those are all opportunities down the road for, again, future commissions, future administrations to work on economic development projects. And I would consider this relatively conservative, like I said, given the relatively small annual growth rate that we've included, and then also the assessment, how conservative we were in terms of the assessment on what is known out in the future. So I think Tony had mentioned before, the goal overall was to show, about 1.2, we're in excess of that once we get to 2027, and available cash to spend. If you look back in 2019, that's how much the North Madison allocation area was bringing in, roughly 1.2 million. We go out to 2026, 2027, that's about how much we project we're playing with. So we're back at the 2019 levels of available cash to spend, all while having invested in all the projects that Madison has invested in. So I hope that provides clarity. Like I said, there's a lot of moving pieces to this, but I wanted to show this in a way that simplified the cash flows from now until 2038. So again, not approach this decision with our eyes closed. We've considered all the other allocation areas that we don't necessarily see here in 2024, but there's something we're fully tracking. With that, is there anything else I need to add?
I would just add that the debt that we're proposing is not new debt that gets paid through a property tax rate. It's debt that is supported 100% by the pledge of revenues that's coming into the TIF district from commercial property. I think that's a really important thing to clarify. And then secondly, as Gary was mentioning, he used a pretty conservative growth factor of only 3%. We've been experiencing doubling, and even in some years more than double that of growth in assessed value across our city, and particularly for commercial and industrial property, which would be inside the TIF zone. So I think you've used conservative estimates. The debt is well structured. It still leaves significant cash flow for future administrations and redevelopment commissions to invest, but it takes care of a high priority needed investment now. And that's what we're doing, is optimizing this expiring allocation area. Happy to answer any questions too you guys might have, but
Questions
those are my
for Gary?
observations from this. And we're not asking you to take any action on anything today. This is all an information campaign to share with you the analytics behind the proposal and how it can accomplish the redevelopment commission's goals.
I mean, the really, I think, good news here is if you look at revenue in 2019 of $1.2 million, and we're to that revenue number again with all the investments that we've made in placemaking and our Destination Madison plan. We're back to those numbers in less than 10 years. It, to me, seems like it was some wise investments have been made. You'll also notice the support for the Super ATV expansion and growth in 2034 starts to really create some new revenue for the Redevelopment Commission as those bonds and that starts to expire. So, you know, again, the investments we've made in Madison Plaza, the investments we've made in Super ATV, all continue to add to our cash balance and the ability for us to continue to leverage money, but still giving us maximum flexibility for years to come.
So, just one to read this, the pink bar, that bond-related expenses, those are for future investments. Is that what that's indicating right there?
The pink bar?
Yeah.
So that is simply an sum of all the annual debt service payments for all your existing bonds pledged from North Madison. And then the pink represents, or the orange, us adding in the 2024 redevelopment, the proposed redevelopment district obligation to that. So you'll see that number go from 840 to roughly 1.5. It's about 300,000 in the first year. It's more like 288, I think, is what the actual number is. And then going to 2026, it's a full payment, so it's, you know, in the mid-fives.
So that's just to service the debt. Then what about the other expenditures for this, where the bond comes into? Is it separate from this cash flow statement?
So that's a great question. Yeah, right now it's all in the same area, but in reality, you know, you've got North Madison allocation area revenue at 6.3, almost 6.4 million there in 2025. That includes the bond project fund deposit.
Right.
And then down at the bottom, you'll see a corresponding offset of non-bond related items of, you know, 4.5 million. So in reality, some portions of
Will be
that
spent.
4.4 in the subsequent years, 2 million, will come out of this cash flow, and it'll go into its own debt service project fund along with the bond proceeds.
Okay.
Yep.
So again, the projects, the dollars that we would spend potentially on the projects allocated in the resolution are the 4.5 and the roughly $2 million over those 2 to 3 years as we implement projects. As we all know, they take 24 to 36, sometimes 48 months to implement. So you look at those $6 million worth of expenditures there underneath the pink box. Those will get expended over 25, 26, 27, and probably some into 28.
Okay. And what's the coverage ratio?
So we can go as low as 125 per the parity requirements. We're also up against the cap of the redevelopment district constitutional debt limit of 4.6 million. So the 4.6 million, we're at about 135% coverage ratio on the obligations, which is obviously, you know, well, we meet that bar in
Right.
excess. And that's assuming 2024 revenues. We haven't included any growth from 2025 or anything of that sort, or any miscellaneous revenues. It's just simply the TIF allocation funds.
And then if we spend the money in 25 and 26, do you have projections for increased revenue further out in like 34 or 35, or you don't have any,
Yeah, so I mean.
or is that just upside?
Like I said, the further out we go, the more unknown it becomes, right?
But in
So-
the cash flow statements, you don't have anything indicating increased cash flow based on the investments from the bond. It's, you do.
No, exactly.
you
Yeah,
don't,
that's
that's all,
exactly right.
that would
I
all
think
be
that's
on the
an excellent-
upside.
That's a great
excellent
point, John. There is
Your
not.
Estimates are more conservative, meaning, and it is, you can see clearly that the investments we're making, 2 years later, it's generating new cash flow. Your point is exactly spot on, which is, we will be making those kinds of investments, but they're not projected to be adding to the debt service coverage here, which is more conservative.
This is,
So
yeah,
we'll
this
have
is
a coverage
only
ratio
knowns.
higher than
Yeah,
135.
and quite honestly, that's icing on the cake, because you get 5 years out, there'll be more revenue coming in than we're projecting because of the investments we make through this bond issue.
Some of the investments won't generate property tax revenue because they're quality of life or placemaking investments. Others will, particularly commercial and commercial incentives, as well as the housing incentives that we'll be doing, that will create revenue in that TIF district.
Great.
We're not
That's all I
proposing to do, tax abatements or anything like that. That could carve it back. Right now, we're not. Depends on what deal we make with a developer, but that would be a part of the discussion if it creates the right ROI that we want.
And again, there's a number of tools that, we've got to work through here to figure out funding strategies for each and every project that has been proposed. We'll talk a little bit about, built that in 25 and 26 projects up ahead, but the state has given us the residential TIF, which we know will be a tool we'll want to use as a part of any residential housing projects, to help fund those specific infrastructure improvements for that specific neighborhood. It likely won't be enough, right? So we'll have to jumpstart that investment with some of those bond proceeds, as well as the state revolving loan fund for infrastructure development associated with housing is available, and those funds open here in October, I believe, right?
Yeah, October 1st is the application deadline for the second round.
Yeah.
They expect to award that in the spring of next year.
Yeah,
You
so
say October 1st?
October 1st.
Holy moly.
Yeah, that's one. So we'll be submitting as a part of that round again, and looking for all these opportunities for us to claim dollars to leverage again with the dollars that we're leveraging through the bond issue. So there'll be lots of tools left for us to use and decisions to be made on how to implement those, but we're looking for other opportunities too to leverage the dollars that we would borrow against for investment.
And the great thing with the state program, for maybe those that aren't familiar, it's subsidized lending, so it's Indiana Finance Authority's subsidized rate. So rather than negotiating with the developer directly and getting a 6 or 7% rate of interest on the economic development project that's developer purchased, the state's actually stepping in and they're funding them at 2.62% right now, which makes projects in more rural communities that otherwise would be completely unattainable because the interest rate just kills the deal, the split for the developer, makes it tenable for developers for housing.
Okay.
Commissioner, hopefully that analysis was helpful for you. We're not asking you to take any action today. Just continue to digest, the analysis that we're proposing.
And again, the conversation we had was good after the meeting. If you've got additional questions between now and October, please ask those. We can get the clarity of the answers to the questions you may have as we'll bring off the table some other conversations around that resolution. So, moving to the 25, 26 projects projections. As you know, in the resolution, we've identified broadly. We had hoped to continue to have a more defined understanding of the state's process for Ready 2.0 and for the Lilly asks. A number of our projects that we have identified in the resolution are ranked highly by our regional authority. So we do hold some promise that the state will see those projects in the same light as our regional development authority. And so those, again, support housing and commercial as well as quality of life projects. So in the 2025, if you look at your plan that's in your packet on page 7, you'll start to see we've started to identify some projects in 2025, which are the projects that many of you have seen before and we've talked about, but we've started to place some numbers to those. Under our Destination Madison plan, again, the Indiana Music City Amphitheater, we're showing support from the RDC for that project. Our American Cruise Lines Boat Landing Facility and Riverfront Development, we're showing Redevelopment Commission support for that. In our quality of life projects, we are showing support for the Welch Park renovation, a project that we are close to getting conceptual design done and estimates. We've already gone out and done some private fundraising through the community for that already, more to do, but we have close to $400,000 of that raised currently through various sources in the community for that project. Again, to leverage public-private partnerships and other investments in our parks, much like we did at Oak Hill. And so we're taking that same approach and that same model to Welch Park. And then the big one, which I'll talk a little bit more about, is our housing support, both in the property that we purchased a few years back, and I'll explain why that project is important, the Madison Coal Company project, and then a single-family residential project supporting that in a way. You'll notice those are in blue. The reason they're in blue is there's other dollars that we potentially can leverage that might change or allow us to do some other related quality of life or housing projects that might not have those sources. Then those are the money from the Indiana Bond Bank as well as the residential TIF. So until those things start to gel, I don't know how we can leverage those dollars yet, but we're certainly going to try to. You'll also notice some infrastructure projects and improvements there in 25, both for our West End improvements associated with our Main Street, and then ultimately identified some additional dollars to support a strategy that we're working on for Main Street enhancements starting, we hope, in 26 or 27 as it relates to the main business district between Broadway and Jefferson Street. So that starts to build out the 25 and 26 proposals to the commission here, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in
27.
27.
27 as well, but
Gary, you want to
a lot
talk?
of work in 3 years.
Yeah, you want to talk? We've done a lot of heavy lifting in the last 3. What's 3 more, right? Gary, you want to talk a little bit about a new process and how that 25, 26 projections will play into some state and local government finance rules that are changing?
Sure. Yeah, the legislators talked about appropriating redevelopment commission dollars for years and years. And I think the traditional narrative has always been it doesn't make a lot of sense to hamstring redevelopment commission funds in the same way you would hamstring city funds, for instance. Just because city funds, you have a pretty good idea on what next year's spending looks like, what your revenues look like. With redevelopment, at any point you could be presented with an opportunity that requires immediate action. So we've always been a proponent, if there is going to be any sort of annual spending plan submission, we would like to see something that's very broad and very flexible, something that we could, submit as things changed. And fortunately, that's what we've seen. So as the rules came out, we're required by December 1st to send in our annual spending plan. When this came out in July of last year, the DLGF was very non-committal on the new statute. We don't really know what we're going to do with this yet. That's kind of next year's problem for us. It wasn't until the last couple weeks we've actually received guidance from them on what the expectation is. My original conversations with the state could be as simple as just PDFing your plan and sending it in, and as things change, just do that. Barnes and Thornburg, Tom Pittman, he does a lot of work here in Madison. He actually prepared a kind of standard blanket form to fill out that you would send to the state to satisfy those requirements. I think internally, we may look at doing that or a combination of that with something else, because effectively, the financial plan as we have it outlaid is basically satisfies the requirements of the annual spending plan on December 1st. So I'm almost envisioning, perhaps we just simply create a new worksheet within our file that tracks actual changes compared to major budget category budgets that we've placed with the state. And to the extent throughout the year, if we're ever over any of those, we can simply just revise the form and send that in. Because as spending requirements change, or if you deviate from that plan in a way that's going to cause you to spend more, all we have to do is refile it with the state. So that's I think my goal. We'll work with Tony's office, with Tom Pittman. We'll work with the DLGF, obviously. Everyone's going to be brand new to this. No one's done this before. So I think finding out what works best for Madison is going to be, you know, a conversation that we're gonna have to work through, and I would anticipate that's something we're gonna have to do every year moving on, just like our TIF neutralization, our TIF impact, our April reporting requirements, doing one more thing that we'll work on, so,
One more monthly report.
one more in the report, that's right.
Is that but that's an annual?
It's an
report.
annual, it's an
Annual,
annual.
yeah.
We've got one in April, August, November.
Yeah, so there's April, there's June, there's August, there's before the end of the year for neutralization, or for
Yeah.
TIF impact, and then there's this now. Which, I mean, the only, I mean, unfortunate part, I'll call it that, is it will require monitoring throughout the year, to where if there's any deviations from what we've submitted, we'll have to send a revised copy, but we'll make sure we're on top of all that stuff.
And you'll notice in the financial plan, over the last several months, I think I've said to you that we've placed those sort of in broader categories, right? Infrastructure, quality of life, Destination Madison, so that those can be rolled up into broader categories, so that where those dollars fall within those plans, as long as we're still within the number, we don't really have to make those modifications. So we're gonna try to make the plan still as flexible as possible and still follow the state statute.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any questions or any thoughts on 2025 and 2026 as we start moving forward? We'll probably firmly take this up at the beginning in October and then finally at the November RDC meeting. So if you got questions or thoughts about those plans, let us know. The Mayor and I have reviewed those, and again, those shouldn't be too much of a surprise because they've been talked about for probably over 12 months or so. So, Dan, you want to take us through new business? The first two items require motions. No, I would just say this is the final change order on the Ohio River Legacy Park. This project is a beautiful project, sets off some of our best assets along the river. The Shrewsbury House does a number of things, taking a piece of property that was basically a dump and overgrown right along our river, right next to a National Historic Landmark site, and prepares that well. The project from a design perspective was somewhat challenging. Historic gutters along Poplar Street, if you go down through there, and some additional drainage requirements from the state as well as from the parking lot. If you remember, we did a number of value engineering components early on, and some of those ended up being sort of penny wise and pound foolish as it relates to city projects. So we made some of those adjustments, and the mayor and I talked, and as things moved on, this was the right approach to the project, was to spend a little bit more money and make sure we executed it the way it needed to be done. So this change order wraps up all those changes. The project is 99% done. We've got signage left and the bust yet to be placed. We're waiting to do that a few days before the ribbon cutting, so that it's sort of a moment for everyone to see. And we're also now waiting on just sort of the landscaping and the park to sort of mature a little bit, since a lot of that is growing in now and greening up. We're looking to mid-October here for a ribbon cutting of that park. So I'd ask for your approval of change order number 2 for the Ohio River Legacy Park.
Yeah, I'm looking for that too.
Oh, it was,
So is the change order in here?
yeah, it was.
See the change order.
Sorry about that.
Flip it over. It's double-sided, so you should see it at the very bottom, right above the signatures.
You want to read it?
Where's it at? I'm sorry? Is it on the back of one of
It's
these?
$227,926. Yeah, it's kind of tiny, right above the big date on the second page. It's double-sided.
A lot of ins, a lot of outs, but reviewing the plan, we had the dollars left. We spent about $100,000 less in the Dollar General market area. We were able to make some good calls on that project, as well as we've got money that wasn't assigned in our quality of life funds that hadn't been expenditures. So that's still keeps us within our plan for the year with the savings in one project and so forth.
Just to confirm, change order number 2, $227,900.26.
Correct. Yes, yeah, those fund transfers, the RDC fund transfers on the new business are cleaning up again and getting us in compliance with state, the Department of Local Government and Finance and the State Board of Accounts as it relates to collections on our allocation areas and setting up those funds. As you know, we did that earlier in the year, and these will just transfer and give permission to the clerk's, treasurer's office to transfer those funds in the appropriate accounts. Just one motion will be fine.
It looks like there's three transfers, 61 cents from 445 to 447, $12,107.26 from Fund 445 to 446, and then 20 cents from Fund 445 to 448. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you. The
Commissioner,
mayor,
for,
yeah.
I'm sorry, my
I was gonna say-
apologies, I have to leave for another meeting. Thank you guys for everything today, and I'll see you at the ribbon cutting next week for the DG market. Thank you. And Gary and Cole, thank you guys for being here. Gotta run. I'm trying to run with Tony.
Again, good afternoon.
Turn your mic on. There you go. Now it's on.
Yeah, it's, hello, can you hear me? Okay, all right. I wanted to just preview as we look to housing, we've talked a lot about the need. As you know, we commissioned, thanks to some dollars from the Community Foundation and partnering with the Redevelopment Commission, a housing study about April of this year, maybe late March. The results are back. We had a roundtable conversation with a cross-section of the community with the consultants about 3 months
are working on, if I may, I think you were gone. Andrew, I've been working with Andrew. He's currently working on that. There's a company called Air DNA that we did a Zoom call with, and they are, it's kind of like the Placer version, but for specifically like Airbnb and VRBO. And so they were working on trying to negotiate a price and get a contract with them, and then we'll basically have all of that stuff. Like that stuff, but much, much more. Like they can project occupancy levels. It can see, basically all the different, this many bedroom houses, these are their prices, this is this is, these are doing well, these are not doing well. It was an insane amount of information just for those. So if they continue down that route, we should have access to that once they negotiate that with them.
We have been, again, Andrew and I have been having this conversation, and like I said, Air DNA.
Yeah.
Group came to mind, so we are working with them to try to get some more accurate information.
Well, I know that the county, of course, is now collecting the tax on the basis, and if those that are, at least Airbnb are running official sites, they have to collect, the innkeepers have to that point in time, and that still doesn't grab everybody.
It does Yeah, the mayor had to leave. I just wanted to highlight one success. It's not tax revenue per se, but I think it's really important to what we just talked about, people wanting to be in Madison, to live and raise a family. That's the investment that you all have made with Crystal Beach. And it was a phenomenal year. I don't know if many of you got to go and participate or go down the slides, but it's a fun time, and I can tell you the community enjoyed it immensely. I was at lunch one day, and they said, "Today's a sad day." And I said, "Oh my God, what happened?" Crystal Beach is closing. So, people were really, but they were very thankful that we figured out a way to keep it open through Labor Day. It was a commitment we made to the community. We made a commitment to keep the rates the same. And so I think on all marks, it was very good. We had 18,000 visitors over the summer to Crystal Beach. That's unique visitors. So 18,000 different people walk through that door at Crystal Beach Swimming Pool and visited some 35,000 times. I did hear a stat. I think pretzels were the number one item sold at the concession stand, and they sold like 32 or 34,000 different items out of the concession stand over the summer. If you were there the first couple of weeks, the concession stand was selling out by noon every day because they couldn't figure out how to order just because it was so popular. But that certainly got itself worked out, and the Parks Department and the Crystal Beach staff did a really great job this year doing that. So I just think that that's really exciting. The one interesting piece of the data is, of those 18,000 people, 60% of the people who visited the pool were from one or two households, or one or two person households. Again, supports, another data set that supports the findings of the studies we're seeing. So I just bring that up. And then a couple other things I would point out: Dollar General Market, the DG Market. If you are downtown, you want to just take a walk or drive by, poke your head in. It's being stocked, and they hope to have soft opening on Friday if everything goes well and systems are up and running. And ribbon cutting is next Wednesday, the 18th. Again, would encourage all of you, since you were very supportive in that role, to be there at 11:30 on the 18th. We'll again try to schedule the Ohio River Legacy Park ribbon cutting here later in October, and then if you'd like to see the fruits of the investment with the cotton mill, today it's going on right now. They have the Picker House open for those interested to go view that. That was a project that the ownership team and the Fairfield Inn and Suites funded completely on their own, which shows the success we've had with that project. And in the just 3 short years, the demand for the project is greater than they could have imagined. And we're talking about some other great things with them as well. Thank you all.